What is going on, and welcome to another episode of the Time Killers podcast. My name is Neil Rivera, and I am killing time with a man who has stolen more South African artifacts than I've ever met, Matthew Field.
I'm working on them. Working on getting those artifacts back.
That is, of course, a reference to the fact that he's been playing through Relooted, and he's gonna talk through his experiences with it later on today. I've also been playing through God of War, or I also have played through God of War Sons of Sparta. That's the one that was shadow dropped during that state of play. And I also played through Crisol, Theater of Idols. That's that's the newest like horror joint from Blumhouse Games. But before we jump into that, we want to remind you guys to be part of the show. You can go to timekillerspod.com/AMA, ask us your questions, drop your hottest takes, be part of the show. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump in. God of War, Sons of Sparta. So let's go back in time, Matthew. A couple of weeks. It's been a while since we've actually recorded one of these episodes. We've gotten a new state of play. There's a new president of Xbox. Lots of things have happened in the gaming industry. But kind of in that shuffle, Sony held a state of play, had some great announcements, and then chief among those was God of War, Sons of Sparta, which was shadow dropped day and date with state of play. So being the sucker I am for anything God of War starring Kratos, I bought it, played through it, and have beaten it, and I'm ready here to talk about it, my thoughts on it.
All right, and I'm here to ask some questions.
Yeah, so overall, I mean, I guess let's do top level here, right? So this is Mega Cat Studios. It's published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, so obviously they're lending the rights to God of War here. I believe some folks over there at Santa Monica Studio also like consulted in terms of like writing and world building lore stuff. So it was very much a collaboration, but more or less an outside external studio. For those of you who don't know Mega Cat Studios, they are responsible for the modern versions of the Backyard Baseball games. So they originally started out as ports, and now they're like releasing new ones. I digress, but nonetheless, this isn't like a very established studio. And I think that kind of leads into my thoughts in that, like, I don't think this is a particularly great game. I didn't have a lot of fun playing it. I think beyond the God of War name here, there's not much that I would say that would lead me to recommend this to someone who's a fan of Metroidvania style games. And yeah, I mean, like generally it was kind of like a slog to play. I was not having a good time, the majority of the time that I was playing through this. There's some good moments, right? Like I think the like what they attempt at sort of doing with capturing the God of War combat, but on a two-dimensional plane, like there's some fun to be found there. But I think overall, like the level design, the like the way that the enemies are placed, even, I think all of that just sort of leads to more frustration and like moments of feeling like you've been hit cheaply than like actually feeling like you're fighting in these like sort of difficult fights.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a good bit of this game, and I totally have the same reaction just from visually seeing it as you. It sounds like you had playing it. It's tough to see what they were really going for, like what the vision was here outside of, okay, let's do a sort of origin story and in a different format, right? Like I don't know.
And I think that like that inherently isn't a bad thing. Like I think the fact that it is on a two-dimensional plane, like I think the way some of the sort of modern God of War combat translates here, like it does translate well, and when it works well, like I think it does. I think there just should have been a little bit more consideration in how the levels were built and sort of put together. I mean, like God of War, at least the newer ones are they're more grounded, right? Like there is some, like you are, going like vertically from level to level, but by and large, like you're not really jumping and dashing. Like you're pretty stationary as Kratos in the newer games. And so like that kind of translates to sort of like the Metroidvania, like level design, like at least what standard Metroidvania level design is. But I just don't think it's done well here, especially when, you have games, Metroidvanias like, Hollow Knight Silk Song. You have, two that I played last year, Ninja Gaiden Ragebound and Shinobi Art of Vengeance. So like it's really hard to recommend this even just as a Metroidvania game, because those do similar things, or at least what this is trying to do, but just at a higher level.
And I mean, you talk about like some of the, like, maybe extra consideration could have gone into some of these different systems. And nothing against Mega Cat Studios here, but you do have to wonder if some of this is just either inexperience or resource constraints. It makes you wonder. I mean, looking at their history, you have to kind of wonder why they were selected for this title. Like what was it about their previous output or who they have at the studio here that I mean, because this is I mean, arguably Sony's biggest franchise. They could have gotten probably, basically any developer they wanted to to produce the spinoff. My mind immediately goes to, okay, what were they thinking here? What did they see? Was this something that Mega Cat pitched to them, and was like, well, we'll do this, and it was actually their idea. I don't know, but it's that's the sort of thing that crosses my mind when you see a game like this that looks a little bit underdeveloped, but and is coming from a tiny developer, and yet is part of a enormous franchise.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, cover the state of play proper, but I mean, within the state of play, you also had Konami announcing a new Castlevania game in partnership with Motion Twin, the not the Evil Dead, but the Dead Cells team. So, I mean, like that's just proof right there of, a company, someone with an IP going with an established team and handing it off with care. And they even had the Dead Cells DLC before that, so it was almost like a proving period. It bewilders me that this was sort of like how they handled it. And yeah, there was a lot about, going back to the state of play, even that how I feel about how they announced some of the God of War stuff was kind of weird. Just like the big sort of closing announcement was just a logo drop for the trilogy and then the shadow drop of this game. But like, I don't know. And also considering where we are in the context of Sony, where, we've kind of reached the end of this failed push into live service games. So this almost feels like, the kind of game that seems like let's just sign it and throw it out there just so we can say that we've got games for the platform while we actually cook the big AAA games, after the ones that we've canceled have been canceled.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but that's a very un-Sony-like move, Sony is, I think of them as very similar to Nintendo in that they're very protective of their IP, like in terms of the way they deploy it, the way they, the kind of games they let their characters appear in. Again, not quite to the extent that Nintendo is, but, they're not just signing, onto everything that I'm sure they get an offer for. It seems like
Nintendo drops bad spin-off Zelda games too, though. Like they partner with other developers on games that don't quite hit either. I think there's other, I think, case studies that we could look at for games that didn't quite hit in franchises that were already established.
I mean, I would argue that in Nintendo's cases, maybe they aren't financially successful, but those spin-offs do have a gameplay hook that sets them apart, even if it isn't quite fleshed out enough, or it doesn't fully pan out for other reasons. There's usually like Crypt of the Necrodancer Zelda spin-off is what I'm thinking of here. They worked with that studio. I'm blanking on the name. to produce like a Zelda version of that.
Oh yeah, I think it's like Cadence Studios or something similar. It was like similar to the name of Cadence of Hyrule.
Right.
I forget the name of the studio.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that is, I think, not what happened here. It doesn't feel like.
No.
I mean, it is a different genre, but there was no. It doesn't seem like there's a unique flair in what this game is doing. Which brings me to a point, like, this game is only rated teen, whereas obviously the God of War franchise is very mature and known for being very graphic. I mean, could this possibly have just been like also trying to lure in some younger gamers into the franchise that otherwise haven't been accessible to the franchise? I mean, you also see them with remaking the announcement that they're remaking the original Greek trilogy. They clearly want to appeal to the players who are younger and didn't play those old games when they were originally out. So, that's another angle here that I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it almost feels the connection to Kratos and the God of War stuff, while I think some of it's done well, I think it's tenuous at best. Like, I almost feel like had it not had the name God of War on it and you just told me this guy was a different name, like these were just different characters, I wouldn't be convinced. Like, there's nothing visually about it that makes it distinct. And thinking about the teen rating, I almost wonder if like just the blood and the gore and just sort of the hyper violence is just synonymous. So like taking that away sort of takes away from some of what makes God of War. I don't know. That's an interesting thought that I hadn't really thought of.
Yeah. I mean, because when you think when you think about God of War, what are the hallmarks, right? You have, I mean, originally in the Greek trilogy, it was you have a super angry, larger than life character who was just like tearing, like just tearing things apart and like extremely graphic violence. I mean, that was basically, the biggest, like, I don't want to call it a selling point, but it was definitely one of the most notable aspects of it. And, it's not quite to that extent in the newer Norse games, but that has been a big component of the franchise, and it sounds like they've gone in the total other, or they've really stripped that part of it away in this one as well.
Yeah, it's and I mean, even just down to the character design for Kratos, obviously this is just younger. Like, I think there's just so many, like, just deciding to make the game about a younger Kratos comes with flaws that you kind of just can't overcome, because he doesn't have his tattoos. He's just like visually like an indistinct character. And I mean, even, like they do have some good attempts through the writing, and, the actor who does play him does a pretty good job of delivering the lines as oh God, the voice actor for Kratos is eluding me now, but as you would expect from modern Kratos. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I think there's attempts to make him sort of seem Kratos like that do come across from time to time. But overall, yeah, like it really is missing a lot of what makes God of War. And really the only times where I felt like it was God of War were like these interstitial moments. So I think that was another thing I didn't mention, was that the game is told as, Kratos is telling the story to Calliope of a time when he was younger. And so it's told with Kratos sort of narrating bits over it, like the older Kratos narrating over what's happening, the action that's taking place. So, like it almost feels like those elements, the ones that are the sort of closest, ties to the really like important God of War stuff. That stuff felt like the most throw in, where it was just like sort of random one-off lines, as he's narrating, like as you're going from set piece to sequence to sequence, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I want to address here is the fact that it was shadow dropped. These state of plays get we're not talking Game Awards numbers here, but they get a lot ever, or a lot of viewership. And I think this was one of the most viewed state of plays ever, if I recall seeing that news correctly. If not the most. And so, like, I mean, it seems like the idea of shadow dropping it while you have all these eyeballs is, it's going to have the, not to bring up High Guard again, but like when you shadow drop something immediately, you're going to get more attention on it than you would if you were like, and this is coming out in a month or something.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you feel
everyone loves a good shadow drop during, a show? Like, I love a good Nintendo Direct where they're saying, the demo's out today, or, this game is out today. Especially if it's something, that I haven't seen. Like, I'm a sucker for those usually, especially if it's something that would mildly interest me. Like, in this case, something in the God of War universe. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess, I don't know if we have, like, sales figures here for this yet, but I mean, I would have to imagine that this probably doesn't get the attention that this has gotten if it was not riding on the coattails of a really high viewership state of play.
Yeah, I think the fact that you shadow drop it and it's got God of War in the title probably led to a lot of like initial purchases. People like myself who say, yeah, like I'll take a flyer on it. It's also it's $30. I don't think it's worth it. Also, once again, like I'm comparing it to Ninja Gaiden Ragebound and Shinobi Art of Vengeance, both of which were cheaper games, and then Hollow Knight Silk Song, which is a $20 game. I think those are just the better games, and you're spending less money on them. So yeah, I think you probably see an initial spike of purchases, and word of mouth so far hasn't been great, and I don't think it will continue to be great. And so yeah, it's probably just gonna be one of those games that we'll just look back on in 2 or 3 years and say like, yeah, you remember when they put out a 2D Metroidvania God of War? Yeah, that was cool. And maybe they do take another stab at it later down the road. Like there are so many developers that understand, how to make complex combat systems in that Metroidvania, like that 2D standard, like that format. So I would like to see them continue to experiment with the God of War IP, especially in those kinds of games, because I do enjoy them. And there's a lot of good things, that this game does. It just doesn't do enough of them well or consistently well enough to really make it stand out.
And the question is where, if they're going to do another spinoff, where do they take it in terms of the narrative here? I mean, do you try to stick with Kratos at some other point? I mean, because this is kind of a big, this seems to use up the rest of the timeline that we didn't know about for Kratos, or most of it, I would say. The question is whether you do something, later, like closer to the beginning of the first God of War, or whether you just kind of branch away from that completely and do something in the universe, but not directly related to Kratos or something.
Yeah, pigeonholing themselves. Like I feel like they really pigeonholed themselves when they went with like really young, like 13-year-old Kratos. Because yeah, I think, even if you go back to, and I guess it's, you get into trickiness with the timelines, right? But yeah, I mean, I feel like he needed a distinct weapon, right? So like whether or not you give him the axe or the Blades of Chaos, I think one of those needed to be present here and they weren't, or they needed to make the spear feel like its own thing and they just ultimately didn't. It just felt like you were poking guys in the back.
Yeah, that's disappointing. And yeah, like you're saying, I think the price tag maybe has a little bit of the Sony tax on it. And yeah, I imagine this is one that they'll get their little nice little profit off of this, but it unfortunately will not be remembered as a as one that people discover and love down the line or anything like that. It will probably be one of those footnotes like you said.
Yeah. Well, that's God of War, Sons of Sparta. I played it and I mildly enjoyed it. I gave it a 2 out of 5 in my sort of mini review that I post on Blue Sky. But yeah, 2 out of 5 is kind of how I felt about it. If I were giving it a full proper review, 6 out of 10 if you're one of those sickos. Matthew, we were going to go to break after this, but I think we can squeeze in our conversation about Relooted. What do you think?
Let's go for it.
All right, Matthew. Relooted. This is a self-published game from the studio is named Nyamacop. Am I pronouncing that right, Matthew? Do you know? I don't know. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, Nyamacop. I think. Yeah.
So this is an unapologetically South African game. It is got a heist theme. You play as a team of thieves breaking into museums across the world, stealing South African artifacts. It seems to be a combination of sort of like an action platformer mixed with some puzzles and some light strategy. But Matthew, I really would love to hear sort of like your thoughts. First, let me know how much you've played and then just sort of what you think of it so far.
I have played probably about 4 hours, which I think if I'm understanding the way the chapters are progressing, I think it's about half of the mainline content, and I think there's probably maybe a couple more hours if you were going to mop up every single artifact or something.
How long to beat has it at about 5.5 hours just for main story, and then it's average 9.5 hours.
I don't know. Maybe I'm going really slow or something, but I
maybe in the 8 to 9 hours.
Yeah, maybe I'll accelerate here as we get closer to the end. But generally, I'm really liking this, and I think one of the surprising things about this is a lot of the discourse around this game is just purely the fact that this is about the Africanness of the game, and the fact that you were stealing artifacts that were essentially looted off of the African continent and taken by private owners and kept for their own
donated,
pleasure.
Sold off to museums.
Yeah, and not a lot of and that's obviously the core of what this game was. That's how it was originally conceptualized, and the idea is you're stealing these things back and returning them to the continent which they came from originally. I think, and a lot of people have had very polarized reactions to that, and I think if you want to get in the discourse, you can go online and do the discourse. But I think what has gotten lost in some of that conversation is the actual gameplay here, and the writing and the story, both of which I'm enjoying a lot more than I expected to be. I thought that this would kind of be maybe, I hesitate to say a novelty game where it's
more about the mechanics of what you're doing, and the story is just kind of there to keep you there, basically.
Yeah, with some games you have a heavy concept like this one does, and then the gameplay does not have a bite to kind of back that up, and it's just okay, we had this concept, and then we're gonna have you do something completely standard in it. Maybe God of War Sons of Sparta is actually a decent comparison there, in that it doesn't really do anything new with the potentially interesting catch that you're playing as young Kratos. And Relooted does not It doesn't do that. I've actually been very impressed by the different like systems that go into the core gameplay loop. It lays them out very like extremely well, to the point where you were like even like 2 or 3 hours in, it's still introducing new mechanics to the heist. The heists that you're performing. And then each heist, and we can get into the specifics of the heist mechanics in a minute.
Walk me through a heist.
Yeah, so basically a heist is, and before I get into that, let me talk about in between the heists, which is when the story is getting dropped, you're talking to the characters, and you're running around, the town that your home base is in, and either recruiting new characters or like deepening the plot with those characters. And the cast is pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's any like they all kind of fall into kind of some regular archetypes, but I think they're all pretty well developed. You play as somebody who came back into town to rescue essentially your brother who got caught stealing one of these artifacts on his first attempt or whatever. And that sort of serves as a tutorial where you break him out of the clutches of this villain, and then from there you you recruit like a professor who wants to see these artifacts returned, like a high powered man of means who kind of provides like the financial backing and location for your squad, and then someone else in town who is like very acrobatic and can help you out in your heists.
So yeah, it's well-worn territory and kind of tropey, but like it's tropey for a reason. It works.
Yeah, and I mean, like it actually grapples with the fact that like, yeah, we're stealing. Like we're doing something that is like against the law here. But and it kind of, the characters have the conversation, and they lay out like the reasoning and how they arrived at the place they did, to the point where they feel like this is necessary, which is all, I mean, it all is kind of, it's kind of hitting for me, really.
Nice.
And then you get to the heists themselves, which are really cool. You have, it's broken fundamentally up into 2 phases. One is the like casing the joint phase. Actually, you know what, I'll say it's like 3 phases basically. One is where you load in and you have a drone where you can like, it's 2D, and you're scanning the they're usually not museums, they're usually like private residences or something where the artifacts are, and you're scanning rooms to see where different things are. Sometimes there are like points of interest that you can scan, that are like other artifacts or things that just give you extra like completion points. Either like you scan them with your drone, but you can't actually extract with them or anything, just like informational things or bits of history. And you can also kind of see like the different points of entry while you're scanning with the drone, and then you can pick your entry point. And then once you pick your entry point, you actually drop into there as your character, and you're kind of casing the joint. Like you're looking around, you're exploring, you are basically setting things up to where the alarm has not gone off yet, but you're staging the level by either like opening up doors or like blocking doors, so that they don't close when the alarm goes off and like the lockdown happens. You're like, you have to use your characters to like hack into things, hack into doors or things, but they can only go like, one room away from where they come in. So there's a little bit of strategy there, a little bit of puzzle solving, I should say. And then, like you have a character who can set up zip lines for you, and you have to choose where you want him to have those zip lines, so you can best traverse to the different artifact rooms in there, and then also get out. And once you get that done, you move into the 3rd phase, where you basically at one of the artifacts, you grab the artifact, and then you're sprinting towards the exit, basically. And it becomes like basically a speed running game at that point, like a parkour speed running game, where you are, traversing over the route that you set out, grabbing the other artifacts and anything else, and then gaining as much speed as you can to make it to the extraction vehicle in time. Where it's got a cool mechanic where like you're not like when you hit an obstacle while you're sprinting, you have to press the button and you gain a speed boost to boost over that obstacle in whatever direction you're going. And it feels really good. It's not like you think that might be a little easy, but it's harder when you're going like pretty quick.
Yeah, that was my one like sort of like real thing that gave me concern was those more action oriented sequence that it just didn't seem like it gave you a lot of information, but given that you're going through beforehand and sort of tweaking the map and rigging the deck in your favor, I can imagine there's a little bit of satisfaction during those moments of knowing like, oh yeah, okay, this door up here is not, is going to open, or I know how this is going to behave, so I can get through it relatively easily.
Yeah, and there's a couple different ways you can do it. One is you can be really meticulous about your like walking through each phase of your escape before you do it, or you can like kind of like halfway do it and then initiate it and then see if you get blocked or caught somewhere, or like take a suboptimal route, and it makes it really easy to go back to the point before you initiated that section, so you can go and tweak your the way you've staged things. So it all just feels really good, and then when you do succeed, you can go back and it's got like like I said, elements of speed running where it's like, okay, you could do this faster, or you didn't grab every item that you could.
Yeah, I was gonna say optional challenges, things like that.
Yeah, and I think if I was gonna have one complaint about this is that I think I actually wish that third phase when you're making the extraction is like just a little bit longer. Because like you end up that it ends up feeling a little bit short compared to the earlier phases. I think it's relatively well balanced, but I want a little bit more of the make your character go fast and run away from the drone action.
Yeah, it seems like there's a good at least at the surface, like a good balance there between like puzzle and action. I can see the action being the weaker of the two there, so I'm glad you mentioned that. That was like sort of my big question. But yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of the satisfaction is to be had in sort of solving everything. Reminds me of the exit games that came out on PSP way back in the day.
I don't think I ever played those. But yeah, I mean there are yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's like puzzle sort of platforming, but puzzle a lot more puzzle oriented. But yeah, no, I mean it's definitely one that I want to get to at some point. Because of that. And then I mean I'm glad that you mentioned also that the characters were standout. I mean, how is sort of the South African influence? Like is it do you think it's worth how much they've put in here? Like does it really pay off?
Yeah, it feels and looks really good. They call it like an African futurist aesthetic to it. Okay. For the uninitiated, it's kind of like if you've played Overwatch, it's that like the Numbani level. If you kind of flesh that out into a whole city or world, and I mean I don't want to overstate it. Like the city, the parts of the city that you can traverse is not enormous, and you're in 2D even in the between heist sections. But I think they're like for as short, I guess, as the game is, it feels like the number of art assets that they've put into every area like makes it feel really unique. Like they're not reusing assets left and right or anything. Like everything feels very handcrafted, and it makes it it makes it look really, really nice to look at and interact with.
Nice. Well, that is Relooted. Once again, that is Namacop, and it's on it's Xbox and PC only. So it's one of a rare Xbox exclusive. But yeah, go play it, go enjoy it. It's relatively cheap, if I recall correctly. It was $20.
I was going to say, yeah, and contrary to the Sons of Sparta that we just talked about, this is only I think $15 on
Yeah.
on Steam at least, and it is on Game Pass as well. So yeah, I recommend
Relooted,
it.
y'all. Get out and play it. You got no reason not to. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up our review-heavy episode with Crisol, Theater of Idols. And we're back. Matthew, I want to take you back to when I was playing through God of War Sons of Sparta. Frequently, my mind would go to another game, a different game. And I was just, I was really just pushing through Sons of Sparta just to get through it so I could go back and play Crisol, Theater of Idols. This is from Vermila Studios and published by Blumhouse Games. If you don't know, Blumhouse has been doing horror movies for a while now, and they're in the games business, and this is one that they put out. Vermila Studios is an independent studio based out of Spain, and I think that is sort of a great place to start with this game because there is such a huge Spanish influence, and that's what drew me to it. I guess the overview is you are on an island called Tormentosa, which is sort of, really loosely, I would say directly inspired by Spain. You sort of get roped in, almost in a BioShock kind of way, roped into this conflict between two gods that are fighting against each other, and everything sort of plays out as you would expect a modern survival horror game to play out. I think this compares very, very similarly to the modern Resident Evil games. We're recording this the day before Requiem drops, so I know I'm not going to convince any of you guys to play this over that, but I think there's a lot of, influence there from the modern Resident Evil games, but with, I think, a little bit of BioShock's DNA, and that's in the combat, which the main hook here is that all of the weapons that you obtain have to be reloaded with your own blood. So each combat encounter then becomes this balance between avoiding damage and then also making sure that you're accurate hitting your enemies. And then if either of those things are going wrong, then you have a health problem. So, it kind of adds this tension to this added layer of tension to each of the encounters. The sort of overall art design on the weapons was super dope. So yeah, I mean, top level, I really enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I think it doesn't go as far as it can with the story. I think it kind of takes a very safe landing at the end. Like, you can kind of tell it ran out. The story just sort of runs out of steam at the end. And I do think that while the mechanic of reloading the guns with your blood is really novel and unique, I don't think that it does anything like unique with different powers or abilities. Like, they're all pretty standard guns. So yeah, I mean, I think despite that, it really, like, the really what drove me through was just sort of the overall vibe and the tone of the world. I thought it was a really cool and unique world to explore. Like, it was one that I genuinely didn't want to stop exploring, which is crazy for a game that is actually a survival horror game. So yeah, despite some of the gameplay and story sort of shortcomings, the world building and sort of the themes overall kept me through the end.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at anything for this game, like, the first thing that sticks out of me is, like, it is, like, beautiful in a very unique way. Yeah, like, and that's that. I think the Spanish influence that you're talking about here. It's got, like,
It knows like it knows what its scope is, you know, like it doesn't really try to swing for the fences. Like it is kind of a smaller contained experience, but I think that allows them to then really ratchet up the visuals, and like the art direction definitely helps with that.
Yeah, like it feels very very dense. Like every zone or every like level that you're in is, it feels like it's lots of handcrafted things in the environment to catch your eye. Um, it actually kind of gives me like, I guess it's like some of these enemies have like the doll masks or whatever. It gives me kind of a
Yeah.
like a Lies of P feeling. Obviously, a very
Yeah,
different
there's a
kind of
little bit of
game.
that. They're like, yeah, porcelain statues, or yeah, I forget, like it doesn't say specifically like what they're made out of, but yeah, they have like a porcelain kind of finish or sheen to them. Yeah, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and so I mean, like, and the other like the other main Spanish made franchise that comes to mind is Blasphemous, which there is an element of this like Catholic style ornamentation that is visible both in clothing and in the world. Um, yeah, I mean it's very striking to look at. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, I mean, like it I don't want to undersell the BioShock influences either, because it does have, I think one of the things that sort of stuck out to me was that it's got that like innate world building that BioShock and even Half-Life 2 are so good at, where like a lot of what's sort of being presented to you about the world and the characters and like what's happened here in the past is, done through these, sort of gorgeous pop art, posters and flyers and things like that. And it's all in that same sort of retro theme as like the BioShock franchise is really known for, and like Fallout even. So yeah, I mean, I think having that in there as well, and even, I think the story draws a lot from it as well, with like the unreliable narrator. I wish there was almost more BioShock influence, because like it's not immersive sim, which, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with this game not being an immersive sim, but like I would have liked, them to go a little bit more down the like exploring the blood powers more, and like giving us more to do with that versus it just being bullets to health, like that sort of dynamic. If they had added a couple of simple powers even on top of that, I think that would have gone a long way.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you imagine that like if this is successful, they end up coming back and adding in a sequel. Like it feels like they really left a lot of room for them to expand upon, both from a gameplay and world building perspective, if they get a sequel or do something else in this universe.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it does get a sequel, and I hope it does do well. It's going to be hard to sell this over anyone now that Resident Evil 9 is coming out, but I mean, it's $20, and it constantly punches above its weight, I would say. It feels like they could have charged $40 for this thing and gotten away for it, with it. So I would say, any fans of survival horror, this is a easy recommend. I mean, it only took me like 12 to 15 hours to blow through. Probably could have done it quicker. The checkpointing system was a little wonky, and I had to play it in a couple more sessions than I would have hoped. But yeah, I mean, overall, I was really, really, really pleased with it. One last thing I'll say is don't do the English voice acting, do the Spanish voice acting. The writing is just kind of bad overall. And so like the characters, are, really what they're saying is ultimately nonsensical, but just the way that it's delivered in the Spanish language is just better overall, if you ask me. So yeah, recommend that. I mean, obviously this is a game that is unapologetically Spanish. You've got full Serrano ham hocks just chilling on countertops. So yeah, if you really enjoy Spanish culture and like architecture, the buildings, obviously, there's a lot for you here in this beyond just the actual good horror.
couple last things I wanted to ask about this. So you mentioned the writing and the voice of the characters isn't very good. I mean, how is the story in this overall? Like, does it build a compelling narrative, or is it more just about exploring the setting that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the story it pulls at some good threads. I think ultimately, I was ultimately let down by the ending itself, but there's some revelations that happen in the lead up to the ending that I would put on par with like a BioShock and things like that, where it's, some of those are a little bit more predictable than others. But I think the way that it's presented here, I think it's done pretty well. I don't think it's going to be one that, you ultimately come back to for the story. It is more the strength of the setting. But yeah, I mean, it's serviceable enough to justify like getting through the whole thing. I never felt like there wasn't a good reason or good motivation to push forward.
And my last question here is how is the difficulty? Like, did it feel punishing, or was it kind of breezy as far as like, I mean, again, comparing to like a survival horror game like a Resident Evil, which I would say most Resident Evils are pretty well balanced. Like they're challenging but not punishing on the default difficulty. How did the difficulty feel here for you?
I would say this is probably where it falls short compared to something like a Resident Evil, and it kind of goes back to them not having enough to do with your blood. So I think they overcorrected in that they give you plenty of items to heal. One thing I didn't mention is that the way that you heal yourself, or the way that you store blood, or restore your blood, if you will, is by sucking it from, dead creatures that you find throughout. So you'll find like these dead pigs and, horses laying in the middle of the ground that you just sort of absorb their blood. And so, I think ultimately, like, I think they're too afraid to put you in these situations where you're, I never felt like I didn't have enough healing items and enough stuff to like really go to toe to toe with like a room full of enemies. And I would say even at the end, like there were enemy rooms that I was like, I feel like this is, way too action oriented for a horror game. So it kind of just comes back to like, I think if they had given me more to do with like, like blood powers or even like blood grenades, things like that, one more sort of wrinkle in the combat to add there, it would have given me more pause in some of those moments. Otherwise I felt like I had enough, ammo, quote unquote, blood to last me throughout the games, really. And like there's a couple of different boss fights, they're all pretty simple. The difficulty overall isn't too crazy, and it wasn't one that I really felt like, even as a horror game, I didn't really feel scared, because I never really felt like I had a scarcity of materials or of resources.
Yeah, so it goes for more of like an eeriness to it, and like an unsettling vibe versus like an outright horror and survival vibe. It seems like.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, like the gunplay is like totally serviceable. Like there's nothing like, I don't think there's anything bad about it. And I think them choosing to sort of lean more into the combat wasn't a bad decision. And I think the way that they built the combat works. I think it just needs more decisions for you to make as the player of like, okay, do I use this or that? Like it's generally just the 4 guns, and you have a melee attack as well.
Yeah. Well, cool. I mean, I like this. I think it's got a good vibe. I mean, $18 for something like this does feel like pretty cheap. And yeah, if I get a hankering for some more something like this after Resident Evil, then I will for sure check this out.
Well, yeah, guys, that is going to do it for our show today. And as Matthew alluded to, next time we record, we'll have plenty to talk through. So this is kind of like our last, like, sort of episode in the, what I'm calling the swimming in sevens period, where, like, we've had some game releases, but none of them have truly been bangers. I mean, obviously I feel like, the games that we spoke about today were good, in various ways. But, it really feels like now with Resident Evil Requiem releasing tomorrow on the 27th, that's really going to kick off like a nice little season here of releases. So our next episode, we're going to be talking through Resident Evil Requiem. I am also going to be playing through Pokemon Pokopia. And then we are also, Matthew and I, going to be playing through the Marathon Server Slam and potentially the full release of it when that drops on March the 5th. Matthew, it feels like Marathon's been a long time coming, and I want to start there with you. What are your hopes for Marathon, and like, what are you hoping to see on the 5th or through the Server Slam even?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want to see from Marathon isn't going to be visible in the Server Slam. I think it's only going to be evident after release. At this point, between like the technical alpha that they had last year and some of the closed betas that they ran over the fall, I think I've seen what I think I've seen enough to know what we're getting here from a basic gameplay perspective. What I really want to see is how they're fitting in like the lore and the world into this universe. It's something that they have been hesitant to really show too much of in these previews, probably for good reason. But that has had the effect of making it seem like there isn't really much, and maybe that's true. Yeah. But I think it's going to need much more than what they've shown off in these pre-release demos to keep my interest long term.
Yeah, there's a lot of voice talent behind this, and yeah, I agree with you there because it just seems like we haven't really heard much in the way of like what their contributions are going to be beyond like kind of the traditional one-liners that you get, in between rounds and stuff that I would imagine you would see in Destiny as well with the different characters that you encountered. So yeah, really seeing what the story, because I think that's really like, that was going to be my other question is, do you see it, do you even imagine a world where this competes with Arc Raiders after all the success that they've had? And I mean, I would imagine if that were to be the case, narrative would be the reason it does.
Yeah, or I mean, I feel like I mean, not just because one is third person and one is first person, but I feel like these are going to I don't feel like Marathon is going to cannibalize too much of the audience that Arc Raiders has found. I think you are going to have people who come down firmly preferring one or the other. What comes to mind is like a Dota versus League of Legends situation, where you have two games that are fundamentally pretty similar in structure, but each have some quirks and strong suits that really appeal to a certain type of player. Now, I mean, the question of how many people are going to actually find that they come down on the side of Marathon is a big open question for me. But, I think I ultimately think it will find some kind of an audience.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get in there. I mean, I've only played the tutorial, so I'm actually excited to get in there after finding how much I loved Arc Raiders. I've played a lot of Arc Raiders. That just means that Marathon has a higher hurdle to clear for me now than it did before. But I'm interested to see because I can't deny that Bungie knows how to make a shooter that feels good. So I do want to give them a fair shake before just writing them off entirely. I'll be
real curious to hear your thoughts as an Arc Raiders convert and someone who has enjoyed Halo. I think your opinion will be interesting on this one.
We'll be talking about it on our next episode. We also will be talking through Resident Evil. We already know how that's sort of shaping up. A really good showing here in terms of review scores. I'm really excited. I went from potentially not playing this game to now I'm thinking I might need to find some time to squeeze this in with the reviews. This is at an 88 on OpenCritic, lots of 9s and some 10s here and there as well. So looking forward to Resident Evil, checking that out as well.
What happens to me with every single Resident Evil release is I say that I'm not that interested, and then it comes out, everybody tells me how great it is, and I end up playing it. And I've at this point I think I've played every new release since 4. So yeah, I'll be playing this one as well.
Yeah, I have to catch up on the remakes of those, but I think 4 and the 2 remake, which I did play, are some of my favorite games of all time. So seeing those just referenced so heavily, the fact that Leon is half the game essentially is that over the shoulder Resident Evil style versus the other half being the more traditional first person style. I was worried that it was going to feel like 2 separate games and they were going to really mesh well together. The reviews I've read and heard so far seem to just suggest that that's not an issue at all. So I'm excited to jump in and scare myself. So we'll see.
For sure. Yeah, me
but
too.
I know what I will be doing is playing Pokemon Pokopia, which is it's a big release in our family. I'm looking forward to it. This is the Pokemon Animal Crossing Minecraft sort of like spin-off here where you're playing as a Ditto, and it's all about just sort of building communities like you would see in a Pokemon game, but in a more Minecraft formula. So it seems like they're bringing over a lot of these cozy elements, but infusing Pokemon. I'm a sucker for these kinds of games, and the fact that like they're I watched some of the marketing, like the treehouse that they just had for it recently, but then also they had a treehouse presentation recently where they went through all of the different how it supports game share, and how with one copy of the game I'll be able to share it with my wife's Nintendo Switch 2 and our daughter's Nintendo Switch through the game share program. So it's like it's shaping up to, I think, be a game, like the one game that the entire family is all in on this year. So looking forward to jumping into that and playing through it and talking with you guys about it as well.
Yeah, I this is probably one I won't spend a ton of time with, but because of the reasons you mentioned, there will be a copy in my household, and I may be tempted enough to check it out and see what it's about.
Well, yeah, man, that's enough teasing for next week. We're going to go ahead and let you go for now. Don't forget to follow us. Go to timekillerspod.com and find us on whatever social platform that you use. You can also listen to past episodes. Don't forget, you can be part of the show at timekillerspod.com/AMA. Ask us your questions, give us your hot takes, and let us know everything that you think about what's going on in the games world. And yeah, just keep on keeping on, and we will see you guys on the next episode.